Hi parents, this is episode 2 of Leading Longbranch, reading, writing, speaking, and listening, or basically, what is our literacy program at Longbranch? So we want to do something for you a little bit later on. This is just going to be the nuts and bolts, the very, very basics, and then we'll get into, in the next couple of weeks, we'll start showing you maybe some videos and some pictures and some interviews with teachers and ideas about what we do in the classroom. But this is just a very broad overview of our literacy program, which is actually new this year for us. It is newly adopted. But I want to take it back a little bit and look at historically where we came from. We formed as a school community in 2010. At that time, we had inherited the Scott Forsman Reading Street series. It was purchased in 2006 by both Stevens and Erpenbeck, and in fact, the majority of schools in Boone County used Scott Forsman Reading Street. We worked with district teams after we went to Common Core. We worked and we created these units of study that were based on those new standards, the Kentucky Core Academic Standards. So we were still using some of that old Scott Forsman Reading Street, but we were using other resources as well as we were trying to align what we were working on with the kids with the new standards. We also created writing progressions for the modes of writing, so whether it be narrative or informational writing, etc. And then we also really focused on writing to demonstrate learning. So anytime your kids talk about writing a short answer or an extended response, you might hear them talk about writing a CLAW or a 3.8 or a 5-paragraph essay. So just as a building, and this is actually the newest part for us, is that last year we really intensely focused on our writing and making sure that our kids are not just readers and mathematicians, but they're writers also. Because as our friend Pam Allen says, reading is like breathing in and writing is like breathing out. And if they don't go together, then we're going to have kids that are not fully literate. They may be more strongly literate in the reading versus the writing, and we wanted to make sure that that wasn't the case for our kids. So that took us to a district adoption last year, and the district analyzed many different programs. And what they were attempting to do is to get all 14 elementary schools on the same page using the same program. It is a very long story, but the short part of it is that after extensive review of the programs, our entire staff voted to go against the district recommended curriculum. It is not that we don't believe that it's a great curriculum. We just didn't think that it was perfect for us as a school and perfect for our kids. We felt as though the program ReadyGen had more to offer for our kids. So I just want to make it clear that we don't find anything wrong with the program that the other schools use. We just thought that this one was better for us at this time. So we did adopt ReadyGen, and that is our new literacy program. The things that we liked about ReadyGen is that there are actual texts that are in the kids' hands. We were really text poor as a school, meaning we didn't have a lot of individual books for our kids, and that really bothered us. The other thing that we love about ReadyGen is it balances nonfiction and fiction reading, and what we know is especially by the time kids get to 4th and 5th grade, they should be reading 50% nonfiction text, and they should be able to read it and digest it and then regurgitate it and be able to find information in it. Because if you think about it, you read fiction for pleasure, but what do you do in your workplace? It's a lot of nonfiction text. And we want to make sure that our kids are well prepared there, that they're not just reading literature, although we sure love literature. We love it too. Okay, and we also use something called generative vocabulary, and I'm not going to take too long to talk about that now because I'll go over my 5 minutes, but that's something I'll talk about in the future. And I already told you this, reading's like breathing in and writing's like breathing out. And also we love the depth of understanding of ReadyGen. And it still remains today that when we ask all the teachers, what do you like the most? We love the questioning, we love the reasoning, we love the deep thinking, and we love what the kids are getting out of it. They're reading their text and the words that the authors put on the page so much differently than they used to. It's no longer just a scan and try to get some information out of it. It's like, what did that analogy mean? And why did that author use that metaphor? And why do you think they're using that language? What does that connotate? Can you believe that? I mean, it is. It's elementary kids doing that kind of stuff. It's some pretty cool conversations that we have with them. We do still use the common assessments that come with the district program. So basically 12 elementaries are using the district program, which is Benchmark, and we in Collins are using ReadyGen. But the district still wants to keep a check and make sure that all 14 of us are kind of on the same page. So if we had transiency, if we had people moving from school to school, that we wouldn't feel like, we weren't keeping up, basically, with the other 12 of them. And so we take the same common assessments. We don't have all the results from the most recent common assessment, and common assessment simply means that we all take the same exam. But the one that was taken, I believe it was October, November, by every kid in our school, our 4th and 5th graders were on top of the district. We were number 1 out of 14 schools. And then our 3rd graders, I think our 2nd and our 3rd graders, I'm doing this totally off the top of my head, they were like right up there in the top 3, same for kindergarten and first. So everybody, I know that the K through 3s were definitely in the top 5 of the district, and I believe most of those grades were in top 3. So we don't feel like ReadyGen is doing anything to harm our kids in terms of if you needed to transfer to another school, your kids would be obviously more than prepared to be able to keep up with the demands of that program at that school too. Okay, so I'm going to slide this up a little bit. We preach about this to you all the time, and I'm sorry that we're preaching, but it is so important. It is so, so important that kids are reading every single night. We really want kids reading 15 to 20 minutes every single night. That can be you reading to them reading to themselves. It can be them reading to you. That can be while you guys are riding the car, while you're cooking, while one of their siblings has sports practice. You can read to each other. Your siblings can read to each other. That's a really great way to synergize and learn how to work with one another, by the way. The statistics just speak for themselves. The number of words, the number of vocabulary words that kids acquire simply from reading and talking about what they read, it's priceless, and we just cannot emphasize enough that we really want you to set aside time every single evening to read. I know a lot of our grades have set aside traditional homework in lieu of just asking our kids to read at home. So please, 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 we definitely want you to do that. I already said this. I'm really hammering it home, aren't I? This is what we ask of you. We really want you to read at home every night, every single night. The kids can read to themselves, and don't forget picture reading. That is so important. Even if the kids don't read a single word. Now, I'm not saying that I think our 5th graders should be doing that every single night, but there is something to be said for creating those pictures in your mind and creating the words that you think go along with those pictures, and don't even read the words. Look at the pictures and see, what do you think that story is telling you? That power of observation, that power of creative thinking, that's magical too. Read with a partner, listen to someone reading, or read aloud. And you'll be surprised. I am always surprised when I hear my 11th grader reading out loud, because I think, man, he does not have great reading fluency. Like, he cannot read out loud to me, and I feel like it's a completely understandable paragraph that he's just read. So there's a lot of power to listening to your child read aloud and then asking them to go back and answer some questions about what they read to understand. Because sometimes they're just reading as fast as they can, word calling, and they're not really reading for understanding. Then also ask questions that cannot be answered with a single response. So a lot of times our teachers say, ask them questions as they're reading, and so many parents have said to me, Miss Bowles, I would do that, but I don't know what questions to ask. I feel your pain. I totally do. So when you're thinking about questions to ask them, think about using why questions. Why do you think, fill in the blank. So some of them are, I already have that one on there. Why do you think? So why do you think that Charlie ran under the tree? What would he do that for? And allow them to kind of think, and don't necessarily tell them no. Say, I don't know, let's find out. Let's find out if it's on the next page. The other thing that is a really great one is, why do you think the author is using that word? Why did the author use the term disturbed? Why do you use that word? Why didn't he use mad? Why didn't he use joyful? So just getting them talking instead of using questions that give one-word answers, like, what's the name of the character? Susie. Where does Susie live? In her house on Main Street. So those are good too, but they're not great for deep thinking. If you were the author, what would you write next? So that's always a really great thing to do too. Like if you're in chapter books and you get to the end of the chapter and you say, oh my gosh, I wonder what's going to happen next. I wonder, what do you think the author is going to write next? Like if you were writing the next chapter in this book, what would you write? And so getting them thinking like an author, and what could, sequencing, like what could happen next in that story. So those are just some ideas from us to you. And I wanted to touch on a little bit on speaking and listening, because ELA is English and Language Arts. So that's reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And so we are really working with our kids on how they can create great questions on their own, and how, in addition to how they can answer questions well. Discussion. So discussion is not just a back and forth banter, and we're trying to reinforce that in every one of our classrooms. So discussion is a genuine it's back and forth with some meaningful, conversation, and there's meat that goes into each part of that. So I really look at it as though, discussion is not a teacher asks a question, the student answers the question. A teacher asks another question, another student, that's not discussion, which you and I both know, but sometimes that gets confused in the classroom. But when we see real, genuine discussion happening in a classroom, it is kid to kid, and it is intense, and they can challenge one another in a very polite and respectful way, and it deepens one another's thinking, and sometimes it lets them change their own perspective of what they thought before they started talking to that partner. It's a really, really cool thing to watch. So I'm going to try to catch some of that on video for you guys this year. And then assessment for speaking listening is not necessarily a traditional type of assessment, paper, pencil. A lot of times that assessment is, very non-traditional. So what can you do at home to boost speaking and listening for your kids? Engage in discussion with them. Yes, I know you guys are super tired after a really long day at work. I am too. Sometimes the last thing I want to do is have a discussion, but even a 5-minute discussion would be more, and it would be so meaningful, and it would be awesome. And you would use the same type of questioning from your previous slide. So be thinking of, open-ended questions that you could use, and maybe not a lot of judgment on their answer. Here's my example. I always use my 17-year-old as an example because he's comical to me. He's probably not comical to anybody else but me. But for instance, he loves to talk about cars, and I know he can't afford a Corvette. I know he's probably never going to afford a Corvette, but he seems to think in his mind that at some point he will. So he, will want to get into discussion with us about, if you got a Corvette, Mom, which one would you get? Like, which one would you be really interested in getting? Which one do you think that I should get? And do you think I should get? And what I want to say as the mom is, seriously, first you got to get a job. Well, first you got to graduate high school. No, try not to do that with your kids when you're having these kind of discussions. Try and pull out of them a lot of information and then input some back into them. Like, well, why would you say that? So what do you think about that? So maybe you will get a Corvette. So then what would you do? And so I'm not telling you to paint a Pollyanna picture for them. I'm just saying discussion, you don't want to cut it down for a kid, because when kids do take that risk and get themselves involved in a discussion with an adult, and they feel as though the adult has judged their statement somehow, you'll watch that they won't engage in much discussion anymore. So we just have to be real careful when we're having those conversations with them. And so I put some of those other thinking questions on there, like, what do you think? And what makes you think of that? And what evidence can support your thoughts? So that's the learn. Our literacy program, Ready Gen, is a huge component of our learn piece of Learn, Lead, Impact, which is our vision. And the one thing that I forgot to mention on several slides ago is that Ready Gen does tend to be a controversial program, mainly because New York is very, well, I shouldn't make such broad statements, but the state of New York tends to be very against Common Core, although they've done so much great work with the Common Core, and they've got so many wonderful things coming out of New York, but the way in which Common Core was tied to teachers' evaluations really tainted the entire program. And so Ready Gen is, it is taught in New York City, in many New York City schools. And so there you can, if you get online and you Google Ready Gen, you might see some really negative feedback. And part of the concern sometimes is too rigorous for kids. And some of the comments from the earlier versions of Ready Gen was that they thought that the books were inappropriate for the kids. But Ready Gen has gone through 3 different transformations since then. We have the 2016 version, which has a lot of that kind of already taken care of. So before you guys went and Googled it, I just wanted to warn you that you might see some things that you might be like, oh my gosh, I can't